How's it going, everybody? This is Visual Intelligence, and welcome back to another very exciting Affinity Designer tutorial. So in this tutorial, we will be making something a little bit different. We are not going to be making one of those gradient, neomorphic, modern logos, but instead we'll be making something a little bit more classy, a monogram logo. This type of logo is usually a great fit for personal brand since it is commonly used to represent the initials of a person. However, in my example, I used a fake company name called General Beats, which I'm just realizing it is not really a bad name at all. Hopefully in this tutorial, we'll see how this type of logos is executed in Affinity Designer, and hopefully it will help you make your own monogram in the future. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Command N or Control N on Windows to create a new document. The size that I want is 180 pixels by 180 pixels since I want a square canvas. And this can be whatever size you want because it is, again, a vector graphic software. So let's go ahead and create a document. All right. So the first thing you would want to do is you want to create a grid, and the way to do that in Affinity Designer is you want to go to View, and then you want to show the grid, and this will show you the default grid, which will be fine for our purposes. We don't need any fancy type of grid. The default works just fine. So one thing you want to make sure is you want to go to your snapping options, and you want to make sure you're snapping to the grid. Otherwise, you are not going to be able to take full advantage of the grid itself. All right, so to get started, let's start by creating the letter B. So let's hit P on our keyboard to go to the pen tool. And then we want to go to an arbitrary point in our grid, and then let's click. And then we want to move to the right 6 squares. And then we click. So let's go 2 squares to the right and 2 squares to the bottom, and click again. And then let's go 4 squares to the bottom and then click. And then we want to go 2 squares to the left and 2 squares to the bottom and click. And go back and click. And then 2 squares and another 2 squares. So that's 4 squares, and then click. And then you want to go back and finish your B. So that looks pretty good to me. So this is the actual shape of the B that we will be using, but the line needs more thickness. So let's go to our stroke panel, and then let's increase the width to maybe like 40. And that looks perfect. So one thing you want to make sure is you want to switch the caps to be butt cap, and then you want to go to the join. You want mitre join. Let me know how to pronounce that in the comments because I have no idea. And everything else looks good. Let's go ahead and finish our B. If we click once here and then draw a line, this will be our first letter, which is the B. So let's go ahead and start with the G. So if we look at the B and you look at the first half of the B, you can see that there is a line that actually, breaks the B into the top of the B into 2 perfectly symmetric shapes, if that makes sense. And what I'm talking about is this line right here. And this is where we want our G to be, right? Since we want something that looks more symmetric, or this is where we want our G to intersect with the B, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and go maybe, let's go 3 squares to the right of the B, and then let's click once. And then let's draw a line until maybe 2 squares to the left of the B, and then click, and then go left and bottom of the B by 2 squares, click. And you want to keep consistency, so let's go down 4 squares, click. Right and bottom 2 squares, click. And you want to go back to the same point as the top, and you want to go halfway through your G, and or halfway through your G, and that looks good. So one thing you can notice is that this does not look very good because we have like some overflow on the G on this side. So we can go ahead and select this point by hitting A on our keyboard, and then you can hover over or drag and select this point, and you can just drag it to the right, and that looks pretty good. All right, so this is the general shape of our logo, which already doesn't look particularly the best, but let's go and look at our original logo and see what are the differences and what we need to do in order to make it look fancy. All right, so right off the bat you can see like the two main differences. The first one is these like ornaments or serifs in the letters in B and as well as G, and you can see like the aesthetics that they add to the logo. And the other thing is that notice at the intersection of the letters, usually you have one side with a shadow or like a gap, which also is an essential part of this type of logos. Let's go ahead to our logo and let's see how we can do those. But before we do that, let's go ahead and select our shape, and our shape is currently just a stroke, and we want to convert that into a shape. So one way you can do it is you can go to layer and then expand stroke. All right, that looks good. So let's start with the serifs, right? Let's start with those kind of like triangles on the edges of our letters. So let's start with a generic shape. So let's click once any point in our grid, and then go down 2 squares, and then click, and then create a triangle like this, and you can see that it looks kind of weird because of the heavy width of the stroke that we have. So we can go to our color panel, and then we can switch the fill and stroke, and this will fix our triangle for us. So let's go ahead and place it in the right places. So if we hit command and drag, it will duplicate it. So let's duplicate and place it here, and notice how the grid is helping me align my shape in the right place. And let's do that again, and then let's flip, and let's just place these where we think is right. All right, so that one looks good. Maybe we can place one of them here, but instead of having it in this very awkward shape, why don't we try something that looks a little bit better, something like this. And I think if you practice, you'll get the hang of it and where you should be placing those serifs and where you shouldn't. For me, it comes naturally, and it's really hard to explain, but that's only because I had so much practice with these kind of logos, which I recommend you should do as well. So let's keep going. Flip, and that looks actually pretty good. Maybe let's put that here. So let's go ahead and get started with the shadows. So if you hit M on your keyboard, you get the rectangle tool, and then you want to create a rectangle where you think the shadow should be. And then for now, let's change the color to white so that it looks like the shadow, but eventually we're gonna need to subtract it from the original shape. All right. What is another intersection? So the other intersection is this one, for example, and for this specific shape, maybe we want this side to have the shadow. And sometimes it doesn't draw the rectangle on the top of your artboard. So what you want to do is Command Shift right square bracket to bring it to the top, or you can just drag it here on your layers panel. All right. So let's do another one here. And finally, maybe another one here. And that actually doesn't look bad at all for me. All right. So this is kind of like a cheating way to do it, right? Because if we copy it here, you can see that obviously this is not a shadow and we want this part not to exist. So let's go ahead and fix that. So if we select this shape and this shape, what we can do is we can subtract, and it will create a hole in this shape. So if we hit Command Y to view our outline, this is what we get. And notice how it kept this small line. So let's hit Control Z to undo. And then if we select this rectangle again, let's make sure it actually goes all the way instead of just ending here. All right, that looks good. Let's do the same thing for this side. Let's do another one here. And I think I lost one of the shadows here, but that's fine. Let's go ahead and create a new one. And that looks pretty good to me. All right. So let's hide the grid for now. So I said Command single quotation mark to do that. Or you can go View and hide the grid. All right. So let's hit Command G to group everything. And let's center it. All right. That looks pretty good. So let's give it some color. So first let's go ahead and create a background by creating a rectangle that spans on our whole artboard. And then you want to hit Command Shift left square bracket to bring it to the back. So let's keep a black and white artboard for now. And then we want to duplicate this artboard by hitting Command and drag into the right. And now let's give that a different color. Let's go to our swatches. Have nothing there, so let's change this to CMYK, because why not? And then I want kind of like a magenta color, and then let's give it some darkness, maybe a little bit of yellow, just to make it more vivid. All right, so our logo is too dark, so we don't want this color for our logo. So let's select something that looks maybe like goldish. I just found this combination of colors to be like a good fit, but you can choose whatever colors you want. I think another combination would be, instead of using this dark magenta, maybe we can use like a blue cyan kind of look, but yep, so something that looks a little bit like this. I find this to work just as fine. All right, so let's go ahead and add some text to it so that it looks like something. So let's hit T on our keyboard to bring the text tool, and then let's click once, and then you want to go here and center a line, Then you also want to increase the size of your text to maybe 72. And then you want to select the same color as the logo. All right, and let's go ahead and type something. General beats. So this is a really basic text. So in our characters panel, let's select a different font. The font that I used is called Din Alternative, which is a free font. I will try to include a link to that in the description. But if you have Din, that would be even better. But it's a paid font, I think, and you guys should be careful about those things. If we go to our typography section in the character panel, let's hit all caps. And then we want to go to the tracking and increase that to maybe, let's try 200%. I will go even more than 200%. Let's try 250. Yeah, that looks good. And maybe you want to make it smaller. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's make sure our logo is centered. And it does look centered, apparently. I really prefer this color though. So let's go ahead and copy it. Copy the text here. And yeah, that looks pretty good in my opinion. I went ahead and did that for a couple of letters or a couple of more letters. In this case, I did K and C, and notice how it's kind of like a similar style, but you know, it looks good. I also tried with an O and H and D and E. And what I noticed is that it only works for letters that have more shapes to them. So if you have the letter I, for example, I is really hard to use in this scenario, unless it's complemented with something like an O or a D or something like that, and then you can make it in like a kind of like in the center X or something like that. But yeah, some letters work better than the others, and that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, if you're having any trouble, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll be able to answer one of those comments directly. Leave a like where you're at it, and subscribe for more quality content. And thank you guys very much.